Okay, so I'm going to talk about the power of positioning, and if you work with clients, how do you position Gatsby to your clients? So you may be an independent consultant, or you might work at an agency, but there's this new kind of paradigm shift happening in how we're building and delivering websites now, and how do you explain that in simple terms to your client? So what I'm going to start out with first is what I like to do. I'm a marketer, and I like to simplify things because I find that people can understand complex ideas if you can explain it in a simple way. Also, I am not a developer. I don't code. I don't know any languages other than English. So, and I'm kind of immersed in this developer world. So for me, I need to figure out, how do I understand what is the value proposition, what's going on, what is the technology actually doing? So first of all, I'm going to start out by simplifying what I see happening in the website development world. Then I'm going to go into specifics on what to think about when you're talking about Gatsby to your clients. And then I'm going to share some customer stories. And I'll end with a few resources that we have available for you as well. So just to start out, quick intro, I'm Director of Marketing at Gatsby. That's my Twitter handle. I'm also on Instagram under the same name and handle. And you can find me there. So to start, the web is changing. I started working at Pantheon, which is a website development tool. It's hosting. And I worked there, I think in 2014 is when I started. It might have been 2015. But over the past few years, I've seen a lot of changes in how people are talking about websites and building websites. And I just went to a Jamstack conference a few weeks ago, and it's helping me put all the pieces together as in what is changing. So to start, this is kind of the current state. We have a website. So I'm a user. I type in the URL, or I do my search and click on the link that I want. And what happens? How does this magically appear in front of me with content and video and images and all the great messaging that I want to see? So I put in my URL. It goes to the CDN, which then may go to a load balancer, which then hits a server somewhere, and which then may go to a database, which then has to come back, which I don't know why now they're disappearing. They weren't disappearing before. Here we go. Okay, now that information is coming back through the server, load balancer, CDN. Aha, now I have my website. So that kind of process has built out for a reason. It works most of the time, hopefully, unless it doesn't work. But there are a lot of places where things can go wrong and things can break. So if you are launching a new product, or you have content that's super popular and goes viral, your best day could become your worst day if your site goes down, your server gets overloaded, and then nobody can access your content. So this is kind of the old way, or you could say still current way, that lots of websites are built. And it's painful. It can be painful. So we're going to go from this to something else. But before I jump to the something else, I'm going to give you an example. So before starting at Gatsby, I worked at AWS, Amazon Web Services. And Amazon does Prime Day every year. So it's their huge sale that they do. And they only made $3.5 billion on one day. So within 24 hours, they made a lot of money. And all of the sales is going to their website. And not only is Amazon one of the largest online retailers in the world, but they are also one of the largest cloud providers. So between being a cloud provider expert and having online website expertise, you would think their website would have run totally smoothly on that day, where, unfortunately, they failed to secure enough servers to handle all the traffic on that day. So their website went down for a couple of hours. They still made $3.5 billion, so it didn't hurt them too much, but who knows how much in sales they lost during that time, let alone some customer frustration. So it's kind of incredible that even Amazon faces these challenges of scaling a website. It was funny, I was at AWS at the time, and it was a big deal, and everybody was talking about it, and there was even an internal email that went out at AWS where it was basically saying it wasn't our fault. But it turns out that it probably was, because they should have had some auto-scaling for the servers to serve all the traffic for the website, and that didn't work. So then they had to kind of do it by hand. So anyway, hard problems to solve. So even really big companies, sometimes things don't work so well, and the website goes down. So back to current way of building websites. We're going from that to this. I have a website, and I type in my URL, and then it hits the CDN, and then it comes back. And this really is what this paradigm shift is all about, is going from using older technology and older tools and an older way of building a website to using modern tools, modern JavaScript, React, GraphQL, and modern tools and a new way of building a website that's simpler. Of course, you still have to actually build the website, so all of that stuff happens in the blank space. But when the website is actually served to the user, it can be done in a much simpler way, in a way that is more secure, that is instantly scalable and fast. It makes everybody happy. So just to kind of recap, a new web is about no servers. It's hosted on the edge. Your website, rather than being hosted on a server somewhere, whether that server's in the cloud or elsewhere, is hosted on the CDN. So it also reduces your hosting costs because you can find low-cost edge hosting. And then also, since the build is part of deploy, you can catch errors before your site is ready to go. So that's just kind of my simple way of describing what's happening with the paradigm shift in websites now. And now I'm going to go into specifically, if you're working with clients, if you're working at an agency, how do you explain some of this, or how do you explain Gatsby to them? So the first is you need to know your audience. Oftentimes you'll be working with a marketing team because the website is a marketer's tool to communicate the value of their product or service. It's also used to generate revenue, especially if it's an e-commerce site, and it's used for lead generation. So many times if you're working with a client, you'll be working with a marketing team. You might be working with a business buyer, a less technical person, or this could even be for a teammate that maybe isn't a front-end developer. Maybe they're a back-end developer, and or they just have a different role. Maybe it's a designer. But just keep in mind who you're talking to. And if I've noticed in some of the case study interviews I've done, when I've asked a developer, hey, why'd you choose Gatsby? What is interesting to you about Gatsby? Lots of times they'll say something to the effect of, oh, I really love React. I love modern development tools, and I think this is really cool, which is awesome for them. But if they go and tell that to a client, you'll either get a blank stare or what is React? That's not going to resonate with them. So first of all, know who you're talking to. And think about, what do they care about? So in the realm of, I'm thinking of a marketing team now, what do they care about? They care about increasing leads. If it's an e-commerce site, they care about increasing revenue. They may care about the site being secure. Maybe there's some dynamic data and there's some customer information that's feeding in there. If people have a log on to view specific details about their account, you want to make sure that site is secure. And also, they could care about if it's scalable. What if they're working so hard, you have content creators working really hard to make interesting, engaging content, and they want to prepare for when content is really popular and goes viral. They don't want to be stressing that the website will go down. Also, especially for marketers and others, SEO or search engine optimization is also a big value for them. If you're putting all the effort to build a compelling website, you want people to be able to find it. And hosting costs may be another thing that is a concern for them. If they're paying a high hosting bill, going towards like a serverless architecture and hosting on the edge will be much less expensive. So keeping those things in mind, now I'm going to talk about a few case studies. So at the end of the presentation, I'll also share with you some resources. So when you're talking to your clients about Gatsby, for example, you can share these case studies with them, as well as a one-page summary we have of Gatsby for the less technical person. So I have 3 case studies. The first one is a Commonwealth Fund State scorecard, which is a mouthful to say. This is a website done by Atten. They're an agency that builds beautiful websites for clients. And the Commonwealth Fund State scorecard is a website that has a lot of health information as far as like health plans that are available by state, how much they cost, how it compares with other states. It's very much data driven, and it's a dynamic site. I'll show you what it looks like. So this is their site. You can do different comparisons. You can see top 5 states based on certain criteria. You can check out all the states. I'm going to do this comparison where I grew up in Arizona, so I'm going to see the stats for Arizona. I see how Arizona ranks from a baseline. I can even do a cool little comparison and compare Arizona to California, see how they stack up together, and I can choose any other state I want and get more details. Even download the PDF. So it's a very dynamic, interactive, engaging site. And what it had looked like before was nothing like this. So the challenge that they had with this site is, let me get back to my presentation. So before, they basically had a site that was the equivalent of a 75-page PDF. So it was a lot of text. People could download this big research paper, but that's not really engaging. And they were kind of getting in their own way of trying to get the message out there to educate people about what health plans are available, how states rank in between each other, and that sort of thing. So they knew they needed a different approach. It was just flat, like people would go to, frankly, a one-page website with a lot of text. There wasn't a lot of visuals or engaging content. There was no dynamic interaction. So when they were looking at evaluating it, the head of this project decided to look at different technologies such as Gatsby. And when he discovered Gatsby and started using it, and he started pulling in data with GraphQL to build this site. And what he did is he could leverage just one template to populate like 50 pages that they have, rather than building each page separately. So his first response was like, wow, this is insane, and in a good way. And this was Ken who led the project. So as a result of rebuilding their site with Gatsby and making it more of a dynamic site, they built something that was a lot more engaging, more educating for the user that comes to the site. It's very in-depth experience, and it simplified their way of delivering the website also. So like I mentioned before, they have one template with this massive list of data that they have about all these data points for all the states. And then they can pull from that and then populate a whole bunch of different pages, 51 pages they have on the website. So that's example number 1, a dynamic site. And they ended up winning a couple of awards. I don't know if anybody's heard of the W3 awards, but they won a gold award for data visualization and a silver award for visual appeal. So the second example is an e-commerce site. So Flamingo, or shopflamingo.com. This was the site that I think Kyle showed briefly right here. And this is a Harry's company. So Harry's launched razors for men online, and they decided they have this new product for women. So they needed to have a new site for that. So they built it with Gatsby, and the problems they were trying to solve with this one is that they were doing a lot of marketing push and allocating a lot of resources to make sure the launch was successful. They were doing a bunch of PR. In this case, I need to tell developers that means press releases because they think PR is something else, which it is. But they were investing a lot of time and money into this launch, so they wanted to make sure when the site went live, it could handle a bunch of traffic. They were working on a relatively short timeline, so they had to build a really well-performing site right out of the box, ready for launch. And they also knew that most of their site visitors would be visiting on mobile. They knew this because their original Harry site for men has most of the traffic on mobile, so they were anticipating a similar experience for this site launch. Getting performance out of the box was one of the key things that Tim Brown, who is a senior software engineer at Harry's, decided he needed. So he says here, "We wanted to focus on performance at the beginning of the project. It's easier than trying to make a built website perform later." That was one of the benefits that Gatsby really brought to them, was having performance come out of the box. And in other words, sometimes you'll hear Kyle say this, where there's a million ways to make a slow site, but only one way to make it really fast. So with Gatsby, it was created and built in a way that makes it hard to make it slow. Like, you really have to try to make it bad. And that's the way it should be, because, developers and designers, you have other things to worry about, other variables to consider. If there's something you want the tool to do that can optimize the site for you, you want it to do that. So as a result, their site was 5 times as fast compared to their competitors. It was optimized for mobile right out of the box. They had other performance features, so a super fast site. They had the navigation between pages is super fast because pages are kind of auto-loaded in the background before you even click on the link. And they had a very successful launch. Because this is an e-commerce site, it translates into revenue, but I couldn't get the marketing team to tell me how much revenue, so I don't have that fact. But they were very, very happy with the site. So as a result, they said, as an e-commerce site, performance, for them, that means SEO, search engine optimization, and conversion, is super important, and Gatsby takes care of this for us. Also, we were able to allow newer teammates to be part of the on-call for the launch because Gatsby made it so easy to maintain. This was a big point that they made in the case study, because when you launch a new site, you're not quite sure how much traffic you're going to get, especially because they were doing a lot of press around it. They were hoping for a lot of traffic. But even with that, they were so confident and secure with Gatsby that they had newer team members come on board and help manage the site when it launched, because they felt so confident that it would perform and that it would be scalable, which it was. Okay, the last example is YouFit Health Clubs. So YouFit they're doing a big special now, apparently. They are fitness centers, and they have locations throughout the US, and they redid their site with Gatsby. Now, their big challenge to start was that their site loaded really slow. The navigation between pages was really awful. Their bounce rate was very high, 60% bounce rate. They were losing customers. So one of their big calls to action on their site is lead generation. People can go in and they can sign up for a free trial, or they can go in and they can put in their zip code and locate the gym that's closest to them. And they weren't capturing leads, and they weren't even able to show a secondary page to people because they were bouncing so fast because the original page load was so bad and the experience was bad. And it was even a worse performance on mobile sites. So they decided, we need to change this. So this is just not a stat necessarily from this website, but overall, in general, over 50% of people will abandon a site if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. So a fast site is a performing site, is a site that will generate leads and revenue and just be a much better user experience. So milliseconds matter. So as a result of redoing their site with Gatsby, they were able to increase their lead conversion rate by 60%, which is huge. It's an insane amount of lead conversion. I'm a marketer. If I ran a program that gave me 60% increase in lead conversion, I'd be putting all my money into it. So just by redoing their website, they were able to get so many more leads. And increase their organic traffic because Gatsby serves static HTML files, which are much better for SEO performance. So their SEO went up immediately, their organic search. It increased their accessibility score, and it was much more mobile optimized. So Zach with YouFit said, the website went from a burden to a strategic tool we use to capture leads and generate ROI. So if you're talking to a marketer or to a business-minded person and you let them know the use case for generating a higher ROI with their website, that's something that will speak to them more so than saying, I just like using cool tools. So a couple resources for you. It looked like most of you had already visited the gatsbyjs.org website. We also have gatsbyjs.com. Gatsbyjs.com is a little bit more geared towards folks that maybe don't have a deep sense of Gatsby yet, so you can always go there for resources. We do have case studies posted on the blog at gatsbyjs.org/blog. And then the big thing that you want to take note of is this one-page overview for the less technical buyer. This is on gatsbyjs.org/Gatsby one-pager. So that's a PDF, one page. You can download it, and if somebody's old school, even print it out to give to them, or just email. And it gives a summary of all the value prop for a marketer, a business person, a less technical buyer, a designer, anyone that you might be working with as a client. So thank you.